She inherited $10 million, but there was one strange condition. Chapter 1. The Letter in the Rain. The rain began just before sunset. It was the kind of soft spring rain that turned the streets of Maplewood, Vermont, silver beneath the fading light. Water gathered along the curbs, and the old brick buildings downtown seemed to disappear behind a gentle curtain of mist. Emma Carter stood beneath the awning of the small bookstore where she worked and watched the rain fall. She was 32 years old, tired from a long day, and thinking mostly about whether she had enough coffee left at home for the morning. Nothing about the evening suggested that her life was about to change. Emma had lived in Maplewood for nearly 7 years. She rented a small apartment above a flower shop, drove a 12-year-old Honda, and spent most weekends reading books she had borrowed instead of bought. Her life wasn't unhappy. It was simply quiet. And after the last few years, quiet was something she had learned to appreciate. Her mother had passed away when Emma was 24. Her father had died when she was still a teenager. There had been no brothers or sisters, no large family gathering around a Thanksgiving table, and no distant relatives calling to check in. As far as Emma knew, she was alone. That was why she almost threw the envelope away. It was waiting for her when she returned to her apartment. The building's mailboxes were old and narrow, and Emma usually found nothing more exciting than grocery store advertisements and utility bills. But that evening, between a coupon for pizza and an electricity statement, there was a thick cream-colored envelope. There was no return address. Her name was written across the front in dark blue ink. Emma Carter. She stared at it for a moment. Then she carried it upstairs. Her apartment smelled faintly of old books and lavender. Emma placed her wet umbrella by the door, changed into a gray sweater, and made herself a cup of tea before sitting beside the window. Only then did she open the envelope. Inside was a single letter. The paper was expensive. The words were typed neatly. Dear Ms. Carter, we regret to inform you that Mr. Charles Whitmore passed away peacefully on April 3rd at his residence in New York. According to the terms of his last will and testament, you have been named as the primary beneficiary of his estate. Please contact our office at your earliest convenience. Sincerely, Harrison, Bell & Morgan, Attorneys at Law. Emma read the letter twice, then a third time. She had never heard the name Charles Whitmore. She whispered it quietly. Charles Whitmore. Nothing. No memory appeared, no forgotten face, no story her mother had once told her. Emma looked around the room as if someone might suddenly explain the mistake. The next morning, she called the number. A woman answered. Good morning, Harrison, Bell & Morgan. Hi, Emma said. My name is Emma Carter. I received a letter about someone named Charles Whitmore. There was a brief pause. Yes, Ms. Carter, we've been expecting your call. That sentence made Emma sit straighter. The woman transferred her to an attorney named Daniel Morgan. His voice was calm and professional. Ms. Carter, I understand this may come as a surprise. That's one word for it. He laughed softly. I can imagine. Mr. Whitmore specifically instructed us not to contact you until after his passing. Emma frowned. Who was he? There was another pause. That's something you may wish to discover for yourself. Emma almost hung up. I'm sorry. Mr. Whitmore left detailed instructions regarding his estate. There are certain things we are permitted to tell you and certain things we are not. What did he leave me? This time, Daniel Morgan did not hesitate. Approximately $10 million. Emma stopped breathing for a second. Outside the bookstore window, a delivery truck rolled slowly down the street. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. Everything seemed completely ordinary. Except it wasn't. Did you say 10 million? Yes. Emma stood and walked toward the kitchen because sitting suddenly felt impossible. There must be some mistake. There is no mistake, Miss Carter. She gripped the phone. Why? Mr. Whitmore anticipated that question. And Daniel's voice softened. He said you would understand eventually. Emma closed her eyes. I don't understand anything. There's one more matter. Of course there was. Emma leaned against the kitchen counter. What matter? The inheritance comes with a condition. The rain had stopped during the night, but a drop of water slid slowly down the outside of her window. Emma watched it fall. What kind of condition? You must live in Mr. Whitmore's house for 1 full year. Emma blinked. Live in his house? Yes. Where? Maplewood. She looked around her small apartment. That's impossible. I live here. I understand, but the terms are very clear. And if I don't? Daniel paused. Then the inheritance will be donated to a charitable foundation chosen by Mr. Whitmore. Emma laughed once, but there was no humor in it. So let me get this straight. A man I've never met died and left me $10 million, but I only get it if I move into his house for a year. That is correct. Why? I cannot answer that. Emma was silent. Finally, Daniel said, There is something else you should know. Mr. Whitmore left a message specifically for you. Emma felt a strange chill move across her arms. What does it say? Daniel Morgan read from a document. Tell Emma that the house will remember her, even if she does not remember the house. Emma stared at the wall. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then she said the only thing she could think of. I'll come to your office tomorrow. That evening, Emma walked through Maplewood without noticing where she was going. $10 million. The number didn't feel real, but the message felt real. Too real. The house will remember her. Emma had spent her entire life believing that her story was simple. Her parents had been ordinary people. Her childhood had been ordinary. There were photographs, school records, old birthday cards. Nothing mysterious. Nothing hidden. At least that was what she had always believed. When she finally returned home, she searched through the small wooden box where she kept the few things that had belonged to her mother. There were photographs, a necklace, a recipe written on an old card, and beneath everything else, a picture Emma had never really studied. It showed her mother standing beside a tall man in front of a large white house. Emma was about 4 years old. The man had one hand resting gently on her shoulder. On the back of the photograph, written in faded ink, were 4 words. Summer, the Whitmore House. Emma sat very still. Outside, the clouds slowly opened. And for the first time in years, a memory came to her. Not a complete memory. Only a feeling. A long hallway. The sound of a piano. And a man's voice saying gently from somewhere far away, "Don't worry, little Emma, you'll find your way back." Emma turned the photograph over in her hands. Then she looked toward the dark window. Somewhere in Maplewood, behind a gate she had probably passed 100 times without noticing, there was a house waiting for her. And apparently, it remembered her. Chapter 2: The House Behind the Iron Gate. Emma did not sleep much that night. She lay beneath her quilt and listened to the familiar sounds of the apartment building settling around her. Pipes clicked behind the walls. A car passed below her window. Somewhere, a refrigerator hummed. Usually, those sounds made her feel safe. That night, they only reminded her how little she knew about her own life. By 9 the next morning, Emma was sitting in the office of Harrison, Bell, and Morgan. The law firm occupied the second floor of an old building overlooking Maplewood's town square. Daniel Morgan was younger than Emma had expected, perhaps in his early 40s, with kind eyes and the careful manner of someone who had spent years delivering news that changed people's lives. He placed a thick folder on the desk between them. "Before we discuss the estate," he said, "I want to ask you something. Have you ever heard your mother mention Charles Whitmore?" Emma shook her head. "Never. Not even once. Not that I remember." Daniel looked down at the folder. Mr. Whitmore was a very private man. He had no children and no surviving immediate family. He owned several properties, investments, and a considerable amount of land. Most of his estate has been assigned to charities and long-time employees. "And me. You are the exception." Emma folded her arms. "That's not an answer." "No," Daniel admitted, "it isn't." He opened the folder and removed a photograph. Emma recognized the house immediately. It was the same one from the picture she had found the night before. The Whitmore House stood at the edge of Maplewood, where the town gradually gave way to forest and rolling fields. It was 3 stories tall, painted white, with dark green shutters and a wide front porch. It was beautiful, and somehow sad. "How have I never seen this?" Emma asked. "You probably have. It's set back from the road." Daniel slid another document toward her. "Mr. Whitmore's condition is simple in wording, though perhaps not in practice. You must reside in the house for 12 consecutive months. You may leave for work, travel, or ordinary business, but the house must remain your primary residence." "And if I stay for the year?" "On the final day, the remaining inheritance transfers completely into your name." Emma looked at the number printed on the document. $10 million. She imagined everything that money could do. She could buy a house, travel, help people, quit her job if she wanted. But beneath those thoughts was another question. Why her? Can I sell the house afterward? Daniel smiled faintly. That depends on what you decide after the year. What does that mean? You'll understand when the time comes. Emma sighed. Everyone seemed to know something she didn't. Is there anything else I should know? Daniel hesitated. Then he handed her a small envelope. Mr. Whitmore asked that this be given to you only after you agreed to move in. Emma looked at the envelope. So I have to agree first? Yes. That's very convenient for a dead man. Daniel laughed quietly. I suspect Mr. Whitmore would have appreciated that. Emma spent the next several minutes reading the legal documents. She asked questions. She asked the same questions again in different ways. Eventually, she ran out of reasons not to do it. A year. 1 year in a beautiful old house. For $10 million. Even if the entire situation was strange, she would have been foolish to walk away without at least trying to understand it. She signed the agreement. Daniel nodded. Then welcome home, Miss Carter. The words made Emma uncomfortable. Home. She had already had one. Or at least she thought she had. Before leaving, she opened the envelope. Inside was a single handwritten note. Emma, some doors are meant to be opened slowly. Do not be afraid of what you find. The truth is not always kind at first, but it is better than a beautiful lie. Charles. Emma read the note twice. There was no signature beyond the first name. No explanation. Just another mystery. 2 days later, she packed her belongings. There wasn't much to pack. A few boxes of books, clothes, her mother's wooden box, a lamp she loved, a blue mug with a crack near the handle that she refused to throw away. Her friend Lily helped carry the boxes down the stairs. Let me get this straight, Lily said, lifting a box marked kitchen. A mysterious rich man you've never met left you $10 million and a haunted mansion. There's no proof it's haunted. Emma, every mansion is haunted until proven otherwise. Emma smiled despite herself. Lily had been her closest friend since Emma moved to Maplewood. She was a nurse at the local hospital and had the habit of turning almost everything into a joke. But as they loaded the final box into Emma's car, Lily became quiet. You really don't know who he was? Emma shook her head. No. Then be careful. The simple seriousness in her voice surprised Emma. I will. By late afternoon, Emma was driving north along a narrow road lined with maple trees. The Whitmore house appeared just as the sun began to sink behind the hills. An iron gate stood at the entrance. It was taller than she expected, black and old-fashioned, with 2 stone pillars on either side. The name Whitmore was carved into one of them. The gate was already open. Emma slowed the car. For a moment, she considered turning around. She could still leave. She could go back to her apartment, call Daniel Morgan, and tell him the entire arrangement was too strange. Then she looked at the photograph resting on the passenger seat. Her mother, a little girl who looked like Emma. And the same house. Emma drove through the gate. The gravel road curved through tall trees before opening onto a wide lawn. The house stood at the top of a small hill, larger than it had looked in photographs. Its windows reflected the orange sky. A woman was waiting on the front porch. She was probably in her 60s, with silver hair gathered neatly behind her head and a navy blue coat buttoned to the collar. Emma stepped from the car. Ms. Carter. Yes. The woman smiled. I'm Margaret Bell. I took care of the house for Mr. Whitmore. Emma looked toward the enormous front door. Did you live here with him? For many years. Then maybe you can tell me who he was. Margaret's smile faded, but only slightly. I can tell you who he was to me. Emma waited. He was a lonely man who spent most of his life wishing he had made different choices. That wasn't what Emma had expected. Margaret picked up one of the boxes. Come inside, it's getting cold. The front door opened with a deep wooden sound. Emma stepped into the house. The first thing she noticed was the smell. Old wood, books, something faintly sweet like dried flowers. The entrance hall was enormous. A staircase curved toward the second floor, and portraits covered the walls. A grandfather clock stood near the door, ticking steadily. Emma stopped. A strange feeling moved through her. She knew this room. Not clearly, but somewhere inside her, she knew it. Margaret noticed her expression. Are you all right? Emma nodded slowly. I think so. Then, without thinking, she walked across the hall. Margaret watched her. Emma stopped in front of a small table beside the staircase. On it sat a porcelain bowl filled with polished stones. She reached into the bowl and lifted a smooth blue one. Her fingers closed around it. A memory flashed. A little girl laughing. A man's hand placing the stone into her palm. A voice saying, "Blue is for courage." Emma dropped the stone. It struck the table and rolled across the floor. Margaret went completely still. Emma looked at her. What is it? For several seconds, Margaret said nothing. Then she walked toward the stone and picked it up. Where did you hear that? Emma felt her heart begin to beat faster. I don't know. Who told you blue was for courage? Emma shook her head. I don't remember. Margaret stared at her with an expression Emma couldn't understand. Then she placed the stone back in the bowl. Perhaps you'll remember. That was all she said. Margaret showed Emma around the first floor. There was a library with shelves stretching to the ceiling, a dining room large enough for 20 people, and a kitchen that had clearly been updated more recently than the rest of the house. Finally, they went upstairs. "Your room is at the end of the hall," Margaret said. "My room." Margaret glanced at her. "Yes." Emma followed her. The hallway was long and lined with windows. At the end stood a white door. Margaret opened it. The room beyond was warm and softly lit. Emma stopped breathing. It was not a guest room. Someone had prepared it for her. A bookshelf stood against one wall. A quilt covered the bed. On the desk beside the window sat a small lamp with a faded yellow shade. And hanging above the fireplace was a painting. A young woman stood beneath a maple tree. Emma recognized her immediately. "That's my mother." Margaret looked down. "Yes." Emma stepped into the room slowly. Her mother's face in the painting was younger than Emma remembered. She was smiling, her dark hair blowing gently across her shoulder. Emma turned toward Margaret. "My mother was here." "Yes." "When?" Margaret looked toward the hallway. "That is a story that doesn't belong to me." Emma's frustration rose. "Everyone keeps saying things like that." "I know." "Then tell me whose story it belongs to." Margaret's eyes filled with something that looked almost like sadness. "Yours." Emma looked back at the painting. Outside, evening settled over the property. The last light disappeared from the windows. Margaret stood quietly at the door. "There's one thing Mr. Whitmore wanted me to tell you on your first night." Emma turned. "What?" Margaret took a slow breath. "Whatever you do, Miss Carter, do not go into the West Wing after midnight." Emma stared at her. For a moment, the house seemed to grow completely silent. Then the grandfather clock downstairs began to strike 6. One slow bell after another. And somewhere deep inside the old house, far beyond the long hallway, Emma thought she heard the faint sound of a piano. Chapter 3. A room that had been waiting. Emma stood in the doorway of her new bedroom, long after Margaret had gone downstairs. The house was quiet again. Too quiet. She told herself that the sound of the piano had probably come from somewhere outside, perhaps a radio from a neighboring house, perhaps the wind moving through old pipes. There were plenty of reasonable explanations. Still, when she closed the bedroom door, she checked the lock twice. Then she laughed softly at herself. "You're 32 years old," she whispered. "Pull yourself together." The room was beautiful in a way that made her uncomfortable. It wasn't decorated like a hotel room or a guest room. There was nothing generic about it. Someone had chosen the furniture carefully. The books on the shelf were worn in places, as if they had been read. A small wooden rocking chair sat near the window, and on the dresser stood a glass jar filled with buttons. Emma walked toward the bookshelf. The titles were mostly children's books. She pulled one out. Charlotte's Web. Inside the front cover, written in faded pencil, was a name. Emma. She stared at it. Her own name. The handwriting was childish, uneven, and slightly crooked. Emma sat slowly on the edge of the bed. She opened another book. The Secret Garden. Again, her name was written inside. Then another. And another. Every book belonged to her. Or had belonged to her once. Her hands began to tremble. She had no memory of these books. No memory of this room. No memory of Charles Whitmore. She looked around again. Suddenly, the room didn't feel like a guest room at all. It felt like something that had been frozen in time. Waiting. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Emma nearly jumped. "It's me," Margaret called from outside. Emma opened the door. Margaret held a tray with a bowl of soup, bread, and a small glass of water. I thought you might be hungry. I didn't realize how hungry I was. That's what happens when life changes too quickly. Emma stepped aside. Margaret placed the tray on a small table near the fireplace. She moved through the room with the familiarity of someone who had done so hundreds of times. Emma watched her carefully. How long has this room been like this? Margaret stopped. Mostly unchanged. Since when? Margaret looked toward the bookshelf. Since you left. The words landed heavily between them. Emma folded her arms. I didn't leave this house, Margaret. I don't even remember being here. No, Margaret said quietly, you don't remember. Emma waited for more. Nothing came. She sighed. Was Charles Whitmore my grandfather? Margaret looked genuinely surprised. No. Then who was he? Margaret lowered her eyes. You'll have to find that answer yourself. Emma laughed without humor. That seems to be everyone's favorite sentence. For the first time, Margaret smiled. It may be because Mr. Whitmore spent his life making certain promises. Some of those promises survived him. What promises? Margaret picked up the empty tray cloth and folded it neatly. I promised him I would take care of the house until you came back. Emma felt a chill. Back? Margaret nodded. Yes. How did he know I would? Margaret looked toward the window. Charles Whitmore was very patient. That night, Emma unpacked only what she needed. She placed her clothes in the closet, her books on the desk, and her mother's wooden box beneath the bed. The rest could wait. She was too distracted to care about organizing. After dinner, she explored the bedroom more carefully. There was a closet, a bathroom, and a narrow door near the fireplace that she hadn't noticed before. The door was painted the same white as the walls. Emma tried the handle. Locked. She searched the room for a key but found nothing. Then she noticed something carved into the wooden frame. 3 small initials. AC. Emma touched them with her fingertips. A strange sadness rose inside her. She didn't know why. She eventually went to bed, but sleep didn't come easily. Every unfamiliar sound made her open her eyes. The house creaked. Branches touched the windows. Once around midnight, she heard footsteps in the hallway. Slow footsteps. One, then another. Emma sat upright. She waited. The footsteps stopped outside her door. Her heart began to pound. She looked toward the door. Nothing moved. Then, after what felt like an entire minute, the footsteps continued down the hall. Emma remained awake until she saw the first gray light of morning. When she finally came downstairs, Margaret was already in the kitchen. Coffee? She asked. Please. Emma sat at the long wooden table. Sunlight streamed through the windows, making the house feel less mysterious than it had the night before. Birds moved across the lawn. Somewhere in the distance, a lawn mower started. Normal sounds. Emma held the warm coffee cup between both hands. Margaret. Yes. Did you walk past my room last night? Margaret turned from the counter. No. Emma looked toward the hallway. Someone did. Margaret was silent. Then she poured herself a cup of tea. Old houses make many sounds. These were footsteps. Margaret looked at her carefully. Perhaps. That answer was worse than no answer. Emma changed the subject. Was my mother happy here? Margaret's face softened. Your mother loved this house. Emma looked up. She did. Very much. Then why did she leave? Margaret sat across from her. For a moment, Emma thought she might finally get a real answer. Instead, Margaret reached for her tea. Your mother was a complicated woman. That's not an answer. No, Margaret said, but it's true. Emma pushed her chair back. I need some air. She grabbed her coat and walked outside. The morning was cool and bright. The grounds behind the house stretched farther than she had realized. There was a garden, a small greenhouse, and a path leading toward the trees. Emma followed the path. She needed to move. She needed to think about something other than rooms that had supposedly been waiting for her. The garden was overgrown but beautiful. Daffodils pushed through the soil beside old stone walls. A wooden bench sat beneath an enormous oak tree. Emma stopped there. Carved into the trunk was a small heart. Inside it were 2 letters. M.W. She touched the carving. Another memory came. This time it was clearer. A young woman laughing. Her mother. A little girl running through the grass. Emma. And a man sitting on this very bench. His hair was darker then. He held a book in one hand. The little girl climbed onto his lap. Again, she shouted. The man laughed. One more time. Then everything disappeared. Emma stepped backward. She pressed one hand against her chest. Charles Whitmore. He had been here. With her. She knew it now. Not because someone told her. Because she remembered. Only for a few seconds. But it was real. Emma returned to the house with dirt on her shoes and questions filling her mind. In the entrance hall, she found Margaret speaking quietly with a man she didn't recognize. He was tall, perhaps 50, wearing a dark coat despite the mild weather. When he saw Emma, he stopped talking. Margaret turned. Miss Carter, this is Thomas Reed. He's been managing some of the property matters. Thomas smiled politely. So you're the famous Emma Carter. Emma frowned. Famous? Forgive me, wrong choice of words. She shook his hand. His grip was firm but cold. Did you know Charles Whitmore? Everyone in this town knew Mr. Whitmore. That isn't what I asked. Thomas smiled again. No, I suppose it isn't. Something about him made Emma uneasy. He glanced toward the staircase. Quite a responsibility, inheriting a place like this. I'm still getting used to it. You should be careful with old houses. Emma looked at him. Why? Because they have a way of keeping things. The word sounded too familiar. Before Emma could respond, Margaret stepped forward. Mr. Reed was just leaving. Thomas's smile disappeared for half a second. Then it returned. Of course. He tipped his head toward Emma. Welcome home, Miss Carter. After he left, Emma turned to Margaret. Who was that? Someone you don't need to worry about. Again, not an answer. Margaret sighed. He handled some business matters for Charles, that's all. Emma watched the front door close behind him. She wasn't convinced. That afternoon, she decided to explore the house. Not the West Wing. She had promised herself that much. The library was her first destination. It was the largest room in the house and probably her favorite. Sunlight entered through tall windows, and the shelves seemed to contain books on every subject imaginable. Emma ran her fingers along their spines. Near the back of the room, she found a desk. It was locked. Of course it was. She searched the drawers around it but found only old stationery and a dried fountain pen. Then she noticed a small brass plaque attached beneath the desk. Emma leaned closer. There were words engraved on it. For Emma when she is ready. She stared at them. Her name. Again. She looked around the empty library. Ready for what? The house gave no answer. But as she turned to leave, something caught her eye. A photograph on the far shelf. Emma walked toward it. It showed Charles Whitmore standing beside her mother. They were both smiling. Emma recognized her mother immediately. But this time she looked at Charles. His face was older, serious but gentle. And suddenly, Emma knew where she had seen his eyes before. She had seen them in the mirror. Not exactly, but close enough to make her stomach tighten. She picked up the photograph. On the back, someone had written a date. June 14, 1999. And beneath it, in her mother's handwriting, were 6 words Emma would read again and again that evening. Some secrets begin as acts of love. Emma stood alone in the library. Outside, the wind moved through the trees. And somewhere upstairs, behind a closed door, a piano began to play. This time, Emma was certain of it. Chapter 4, The First Rule. Emma did not move for several seconds. The piano played only 3 notes. Slow, soft, then silence. She looked toward the library door. The sound had come from upstairs. There was no question about it. Emma placed the photograph carefully on the desk and walked into the hallway. "Margaret," she called. No answer. The house seemed to be holding its breath. Emma reached the staircase and looked up toward the 2nd floor. Morning sunlight still filled the lower windows, but the hallway above appeared strangely dark. She remembered Margaret's warning. "Whatever you do, do not go into the west wing after midnight." Emma glanced at the grandfather clock. It was only 2 in the afternoon. Technically, she thought, that wasn't against the rules. But the thought made her uncomfortable. She climbed the stairs anyway. Each step gave a quiet creak beneath her feet. At the top, she turned toward the west hallway. She had seen it the day before. It began near the end of the 2nd floor corridor, separated from the rest of the house by a pair of heavy wooden doors. Those doors were closed now. Emma walked toward them. The closer she came, the colder the air felt. She stopped with her hand hovering over the brass handle. Then a voice behind her made her jump. "Ms. Carter." Emma turned sharply. Margaret stood at the other end of the hallway. "You really need to stop doing that," Emma said, pressing a hand against her chest. Margaret didn't smile. "I was looking for you." "So was I." Margaret's eyes moved toward the doors. "I thought you might be." Emma folded her arms. "There's a piano in there." Margaret was quiet. "I heard it." "Yes." "Is someone living in this house besides us?" "No." "Then who is playing?" Margaret looked past Emma toward the closed doors. There are some questions that don't become easier just because you ask them more loudly. Emma let out a slow breath. "Margaret, I don't know if you've noticed, but I'm trying very hard to stay calm. I moved into a mansion because a dead stranger promised me $10 million. I'm finding books with my name in them, remembering things I shouldn't remember, and now someone is playing the piano in a part of the house I'm apparently not supposed to enter." "I know." "Then please stop treating me like a child." That seemed to hurt Margaret. For a moment, Emma wished she hadn't said it. Margaret walked closer. "I don't think you're a child." "Then tell me the truth." Margaret looked directly into her eyes. "The truth is that I don't know all of it." Emma hadn't expected that. "I know what Charles told me. I know what your mother asked me to keep private, but there are things they never told me." "What did my mother ask you to keep private?" Margaret shook her head. "Not yet." Emma laughed quietly. "Of course." Margaret reached into her pocket and took out a small key. "This belongs to you." Emma stared at it. "What does it open?" "Your mother's room." Emma looked toward the west wing. "Is it in there?" "No, the east side." "Why didn't you tell me before?" "Because you had enough to think about." Emma took the key. It was old and warm from Margaret's hand. "Where is the room?" Margaret pointed down the hallway. "Third door on the left." Emma went without another word. The door was easy to find. It was painted pale blue and had a small brass handle. For some reason, Emma stood outside it for several minutes before using the key. She wasn't sure what she expected. A room frozen in time. A hidden letter. Some impossible answer. Instead, when the door opened, she found a simple bedroom. The curtains were closed and the air smelled faintly of cedar. A narrow bed stood against one wall. There was a dresser, a writing desk, and a rocking chair near the window. Emma stepped inside. Her mother had been here. That fact felt heavier than she expected. She touched the desk. Then the chair. On the wall hung a photograph of a younger version of her mother standing beside a lake. Emma smiled. "Hi, Mom." Her voice sounded small in the empty room. She began opening drawers. The first contained old scarves. The second held letters tied with ribbon. Emma hesitated before picking them up. Most were addressed to her mother. Some had no return address. She read the dates. Her mother's name appeared on the envelopes as Anna Whitmore. Emma frowned. Her mother had been Anna Carter. Hadn't she? She sat down on the edge of the bed. Slowly, she opened one of the letters. "Anna, I know you don't want to hear from me. I understand why. But Emma asks about you. She is too young to understand the distance between people, and perhaps that is a blessing. Please don't punish her for the mistakes we made." "See?" Emma stopped reading. She looked at the signature. Only one letter. "See? Charles." She opened another. This one was never mailed. There was no envelope. The handwriting was different. It was her mother's. "Charles, I don't know how to explain this to her one day. Maybe I won't. Maybe the kindest thing I can do is let her grow up believing she came from an ordinary family with ordinary people who loved her. You were never meant to carry this burden, and neither was she. But I can't forgive you yet. Perhaps I never will. Anna." Emma placed the letter down. Her hands had gone cold. She wanted to keep reading. She also wanted to run. Instead, she searched the room until she found a small wooden box at the back of the closet. Inside were photographs. Emma as a baby. Her mother holding her. Charles Whitmore standing nearby. In one photograph, Charles was looking at Emma with an expression she had seen before. Not friendship. Not simple affection. Something deeper. Something protective. Emma turned the photograph over. Written on the back were the words, "Her first Christmas." Nothing else. No explanation. Emma sat on the floor with the photographs around her. The truth was getting closer. She could feel it. But every answer seemed to create 3 new questions. A knock sounded against the open door. Emma looked up. Margaret stood there. "I thought you might find those." "Who was my father?" Margaret closed her eyes briefly. Emma stood. "Don't tell me you can't answer." "I can." "Then do it." Margaret entered the room and closed the door behind her. "Your father was Daniel Carter." Emma felt relief and confusion at once. "My father?" "Yes." "Then why was Charles in all these pictures?" Margaret looked toward the photographs. "Because Charles loved you." "Why?" Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "Because sometimes people love children even when they aren't allowed to be part of their lives." Emma stared at her. "What does that mean?" "It means your father knew Charles. Your mother knew Charles. Their lives were connected long before you were born. Connected how? Margaret said nothing. Emma stepped closer. I need more than this. I know. Then give me more. Margaret took a breath. Your mother came to this house when she was 19. Why? She had nowhere else to go. Emma had never heard that before. My grandmother and grandfather died before I was born. Yes, but before that, your mother lived with relatives for a time. Charles knew her family. How? Through his sister. Emma frowned. Charles had a sister. Her name was Elena. Where is she? Margaret looked away. She died many years ago. The room became quiet. Emma sat down again. Everything felt too large, too complicated. Finally she asked, was my mother happy? Margaret smiled sadly. Sometimes. Emma looked at the old rocking chair. That's a terrible answer. It's an honest one. They sat in silence for a while. Then Margaret stood. There's something else Charles wanted you to have, but only after you found your mother's room. Emma looked up. Another letter. No. Margaret pointed toward the bookshelf beside the door. Emma followed her. There was nothing unusual about it, until Margaret pulled one book slightly forward. A hidden latch clicked. Part of the shelf opened. Behind it was a narrow compartment. Inside lay a small leather notebook. Emma picked it up. The cover was worn. On the first page, written in elegant handwriting, were the words, Rules for Emma Carter, should she ever return. Emma looked at Margaret. You knew about this? No, Charles never told me. Emma turned the page. There were 4 rules. The first was written in darker ink. Rule 1, trust what you remember, even when no one else believes you. Emma read it again. Then she turned the page. Rule 2, never open the door beneath the stairs until you know why your mother left. Her stomach tightened. There was a door beneath the stairs. She had seen it. She thought it was a closet. The next rule was shorter. Rule 3, if Thomas Reed tells you he is trying to help, do not believe him. Emma looked sharply at Margaret. Thomas. Margaret's face went pale. He shouldn't know about that notebook. Emma turned to the final page. The handwriting was shakier, as if Charles had written it late in life. Rule 4, on the first night of winter, listen for the piano. Emma looked toward the window. Outside, the afternoon sun had disappeared behind a bank of clouds. What does that mean? Margaret whispered, I don't know. For the first time since Emma had arrived, she believed her. That evening, Emma could not stop thinking about Thomas Reed. Why would Charles warn her about him? And why had Thomas looked at the house as if he already knew more about her than she knew about herself? After dinner, Emma walked through the entrance hall and stopped beside the staircase. The small door beneath it was still there. Dark wood. Brass handle. Locked. She remembered Rule 2. Never open the door beneath the stairs until you know why your mother left. Emma stepped away. She was not going to break the rules. Not yet. But as she turned toward the living room, she heard something. A sound from behind the door. Very soft. Almost too soft to hear. Someone was humming. Emma froze. The melody was familiar. She didn't know from where. Then she remembered. It was the same melody she had heard as a child. The same one from the piano. Emma leaned closer to the door. The humming stopped. For one terrifying second, there was silence. Then something tapped gently from the other side. Once, twice, 3 times. Emma stumbled backward. Margaret entered the hall carrying a basket of folded laundry. She saw Emma's face. "What happened?" Emma pointed at the door. "There's someone in there." Margaret stared at it. "No. I heard them. No one is in there." They tapped. Margaret placed the basket on the floor. For the first time, Emma saw fear in her eyes. "Emma." It was the first time Margaret had called her by her first name. "Go upstairs." "What?" "Go upstairs now." Emma didn't argue. She ran. Behind her, she heard Margaret lock the door beneath the stairs. Then, from somewhere deep inside the house, the piano began to play again. And this time it did not stop. Chapter 5: The Photograph Without a Name. Emma spent the next hour sitting on the edge of her bed with the door locked. The piano continued for several minutes after she ran upstairs. Then it stopped. The silence that followed was somehow worse. She stared at the bedroom door, listening for footsteps. Nothing came. Eventually, she stood and crossed to the window. From there, she could see part of the long driveway and the dark line of trees beyond it. The house looked peaceful from the outside. Almost beautiful. Emma wondered how many people had stood in that same room and believed the house was ordinary. She turned away from the window. On the desk lay the leather notebook Charles Whitmore had left for her. Rules for Emma Carter, should she ever return. The words bothered her more than anything else. Return. As if some part of her had always belonged here. Emma picked up the notebook and opened it again. She read the 4 rules slowly, hoping she had somehow missed a clue between the lines. Trust what you remember. Don't open the door beneath the stairs. Don't trust Thomas Reed. Listen for the piano on the first night of winter. She closed the book. That's helpful, she muttered. A gentle knock came at the door. Emma froze. Emma, Margaret's voice said. Emma waited another moment before unlocking it. Margaret stood outside, looking tired. May I come in? Emma stepped aside. Margaret entered and sat in the rocking chair near the window. For several seconds, neither woman spoke. Finally, Emma asked, "What's behind that door?" Margaret looked at her hands. "I don't know exactly." Emma stared at her. "You've lived here for years." "I've worked here for years. Those are not the same thing." "You've never opened it." "No." "Why not?" "Because Charles told me not to." Emma laughed quietly. Everyone in this house followed Charles Whitmore's instructions very well. Margaret looked up. Not everyone. There was something in her voice that made Emma stop. "What does that mean?" Margaret stood and walked toward the fireplace. "Your mother didn't." Emma watched her. "Tell me." Margaret shook her head. "Not tonight." Emma's patience disappeared. "Why not tonight?" "Because you're frightened." "Maybe I'm frightened because no one tells me anything." Margaret turned around. "And maybe you're frightened because you're beginning to remember." The room went still. Emma looked away. She hated that Margaret was right. The memories had begun as feelings, a hallway, a voice, a blue stone. Now they were becoming pictures. Her mother in the garden. Charles reading to her. The melody. Each memory was incomplete, but they were there. Hidden somewhere inside of her. "Why don't I remember this house?" Emma asked quietly. Margaret's expression softened. "Children remember what they can." "That's not an answer." "No," Margaret said, "but perhaps it's closer than you think." Emma sat down. She was suddenly exhausted. Margaret walked to the door. "Try to sleep." Emma almost laughed. "That's your advice?" "For tonight, yes." At the door, Margaret paused. "Emma." "What?" "If you hear the piano again, don't follow it." Then she left. Emma stared at the closed door. She had lived in the house for less than 3 days. Already, she had a list of things she was apparently forbidden to do. She wasn't supposed to enter the west wing after midnight. She wasn't supposed to open the door beneath the stairs. She wasn't supposed to trust Thomas Reed. And now, she wasn't supposed to follow the sound of the piano. Emma turned off the lamp and climbed into bed. Sleep arrived slowly. When it finally came, it brought a dream. She was small again, maybe 4 years old. She was standing in a hallway she recognized immediately. The Whitmore House. Rain beat against the windows. A woman was crying somewhere nearby. Emma walked toward the sound. "Mom!" No answer. She turned a corner and found Charles Whitmore kneeling beside her. He was younger than the man in the photographs. His hair was dark at the temples, and his face looked tired. "Where's Mommy?" little Emma asked. Charles smiled sadly. "She's coming back." "When?" "Soon." Little Emma looked down. She was holding the blue stone. Charles placed his hand over hers. "Blue is for courage. Am I brave?" "Very." The little girl looked toward a closed door at the end of the hallway. "What is in there?" Charles's smile disappeared. "Nothing you need to worry about." Then a loud sound echoed through the house. A door slamming. Charles stood quickly. "Stay here, Emma." But she followed him. She always followed him. The dream changed. Emma was running. Rain. Darkness. Her mother's voice shouting her name. Then someone lifted her into their arms. And she woke up. Emma sat upright in bed. Morning sunlight filled the room. Her heart was racing. She pressed her hand against her mouth. It had been a dream. But it wasn't entirely a dream. She knew that now. Somewhere in her mind, something had been locked away. And Charles Whitmore had known. After breakfast, Emma called Lily. Her friend answered on the second ring. "Are you alive?" "Apparently." "Good. I was beginning to imagine you trapped in a tower." Emma smiled. "Can you come over?" There was a pause. That sounded serious. "It is. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Lily arrived carrying a paper bag from a bakery and wearing the expression of someone prepared for either a difficult conversation or an emergency. She stopped at the front door. "Oh, what?" "This place is even creepier than I imagined." "It's beautiful. Those things can coexist." Emma led her inside. Lily looked around the entrance hall with wide eyes. "You inherited this. Temporarily. And $10 million. Also temporarily. Emma, I want to be supportive, but your life has become the plot of a movie." They went into the library. Emma told Lily everything. The photographs. The letters. The strange memories. Thomas Reed. The notebook. The humming behind the locked door. Lily listened without interrupting. When Emma finished, Lily took a long breath. Okay. Either this is a very elaborate scam, or you have the strangest family history in Vermont. That's comforting. I'm not done. Lily leaned forward. You need to find out who Charles Whitmore was before you start opening secret doors or chasing piano music through the mansion. That's reasonable. I occasionally have good ideas. Emma smiled. Lily opened the paper bag and placed 2 cinnamon rolls on the table. Step 1, eat. Step 2, research. The local library had a small historical archive, and Lily knew exactly who to call. By noon, they were sitting at a long table surrounded by old newspapers, property records, and books about Maplewood's history. Emma searched for Charles Whitmore. There were plenty of results. Charles had been a businessman. He had inherited part of his family's property empire and later expanded it into construction and investment. He had donated money to the hospital, the public library, and several local schools. But there were almost no stories about his personal life. No wife. No children. No explanation. Lily pulled an old newspaper toward them. Look at this. The article was from 1998. A photograph showed Charles standing outside the town hall beside a woman Emma had never seen before. The caption identified her as Elena Whitmore, Charles's sister. Emma studied the picture. Elena was elegant and smiling, but something about her face seemed familiar. Emma leaned closer. Then she noticed a small photograph printed beside the article. It showed Elena attending a charity event with several guests. One of them was Emma's mother. On it, Emma felt her stomach tighten. My mom knew his sister. Lily nodded. Apparently, Emma searched through another stack of newspapers. Then she found an article from the following year. Elena Whitmore had died suddenly after a short illness. The funeral had been private. The Whitmore family requested privacy. Nothing unusual. Except beneath the article was a photograph. It showed Charles leaving a church. Beside him stood Anna Carter, Emma's mother, and between them, barely visible beneath a blanket, was a baby. Emma. Lily looked at her. Well, Emma could barely speak. My mother lied to me. Lily touched her hand. Maybe she was protecting you. Emma remembered the letter in her mother's handwriting. Maybe the kindest thing I can do is let her grow up believing she came from an ordinary family. She suddenly wanted to go home. Not her apartment. The Whitmore house. The thought startled her. But that was where the answers were. On the drive back, neither woman spoke much. When they reached the iron gate, Lily looked toward the house. You want me to stay? Emma considered it. Then she shook her head. I need to do this myself. Call me if anything weird happens. Everything weird is already happening. Fair point. Emma watched Lily drive away. Then she walked toward the front door. Margaret was waiting inside. Did you find something? She asked. Emma nodded. I found a photograph. Margaret closed her eyes. Of Charles, my mother, and me. Margaret said nothing. It was taken at Elena Whitmore's funeral. Still nothing. Emma stepped closer. Who was Elena? Margaret looked at the floor. She was Charles's sister. I know that. Then what else did you find? That my mother knew her. Margaret's face changed. Only slightly. But Emma saw it. Fear. Margaret. Before she could answer, a sound came from the hallway. The front door opened. Thomas Reed stepped inside. He looked from Margaret to Emma. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Thomas smiled. I was hoping I'd find you here. Emma remembered Charles's warning. If Thomas Reed tells you he is trying to help, do not believe him. Thomas removed his coat. Ms. Carter, I think it's time we had a conversation about your inheritance. Emma folded her arms. I don't remember inviting you. No, Thomas said pleasantly, but there are some things you deserve to know. Margaret stepped forward. Leave. Thomas ignored her. He looked directly at Emma. Did Charles tell you why he chose you? Emma felt her pulse quicken. No. Thomas smiled. Then perhaps I should. Margaret's voice became sharp. Thomas. He turned toward her. What? How long do you think this can continue? Emma looked between them. Continue what? Thomas reached into his coat pocket. Margaret moved toward him. Don't. But Thomas had already taken something out. A photograph. Old and faded. He placed it on the table. Emma looked down. It showed a young Charles Whitmore, her mother, Eleanor, and a man Emma had never seen before. But that wasn't what made her stop breathing. The man was holding a little girl. Emma. On the back of the photograph were 5 handwritten words. The day we became a family. Emma looked up slowly. Who is he? Thomas Reed's smile disappeared. That's exactly the question Charles hoped you would never ask. Chapter 6. The Locked Music Room. Emma stared at the photograph. The little girl in it was unmistakably her. She recognized the yellow dress. She remembered almost nothing about wearing it, but something about the picture stirred a faint warmth inside her. The man holding her was a stranger. He looked to be in his early 30s, with dark hair, a square jaw, and an expression that was difficult to read. Behind him stood Charles Whitmore. On his other side was Eleanor. And beside Eleanor was Emma's mother. 4 adults. 1 child. A family photograph, at least according to the words written on the back. The day we became a family. Emma looked at Thomas. Who is he? Thomas didn't answer immediately. Margaret stepped between them. Thomas, you need to leave. He looked at her. You've kept this secret long enough. It isn't yours to reveal. Neither was Charles's money. Emma's voice cut through them. Enough. Both turned toward her. She picked up the photograph. I am tired of everyone speaking around me. I want a name. Thomas sighed. His name was Michael Carter. Emma's fingers tightened around the photograph. My father. Thomas nodded. Yes. Emma felt strangely relieved. She had known her father's name all her life. Daniel Carter. She had photographs of him, a few letters, a wedding picture of him and her mother. But suddenly, she realized there were 2 different men in the story. Daniel Carter. Michael Carter. She looked at Thomas. Who was Michael? Thomas glanced at Margaret. Margaret shook her head. Tell me, Emma said. Thomas took a slow breath. Michael was your mother's younger brother. Emma blinked. My uncle. Yes. Then why was he holding me? Because he loved you. Emma stared at the photograph. Her uncle. A person she had never heard about. A person erased from every family story she remembered. What happened to him? Thomas's expression darkened. He disappeared. When? 27 years ago. Emma did the calculation. That would have been when she was 5. Around the same time as the memories she couldn't access. Where did he go? No one knows. Emma looked at Margaret. Is that true? Margaret didn't answer. Margaret. The older woman finally spoke. Michael disappeared after an argument with Charles. What kind of argument? No one knows. Thomas laughed softly. That's not entirely true. Margaret looked at him sharply. Thomas continued. Michael believed Charles had hidden something from your mother. He wanted the truth revealed. What truth? Thomas looked at Emma. That is the part you still don't understand. Emma's frustration returned. Then explain it. I can't. Why? Because Charles made me promise. Emma almost laughed. Of course. Thomas placed the photograph back on the table. Mr. Whitmore believed the truth would destroy you. if you learned it too young. And now you're old enough. Then why didn't he tell me himself? Thomas looked toward the staircase. Because he was afraid. Of what? Thomas didn't answer. Instead, he walked toward the front door. Emma followed him. You don't get to drop something like this on me and leave. Thomas stopped. Your mother didn't leave this house because she wanted to. Emma froze. What? Thomas turned. Ask Margaret what happened the night she took you away. Then he walked out. The door closed behind him. Emma stood motionless. Margaret was staring at the floor. What happened? Margaret didn't answer. What happened that night? Emma, you knew him. Yes. You knew my uncle. Yes. You knew my mother. Yes. And you knew me when I was a child. Margaret nodded. Emma felt tears burning her eyes. Then why have you spent the last 3 days acting like I'm a stranger? Margaret looked up. Because you asked me to. Emma stared at her. What? When you were older, your mother told me that if you ever came back, I should wait until you were ready. I was 4. Yes. I couldn't have asked you. Not then. Margaret walked to the old staircase and placed one hand on the railing. Your mother knew she might never return. She made me promise to protect you if something happened. What happened? Margaret's eyes filled with tears. I can't tell you yet. Emma shook her head. Why? Because Charles left instructions. Charles is dead. I know. Then his instructions don't matter. Margaret looked at her. They matter because they were written for you. Emma turned away. She needed air. She walked into the library and closed the door. The photograph remained in her hand. Michael Carter. Her uncle. Missing. A family secret. A locked door. A piano that played by itself. She began to wonder whether the strange condition attached to the inheritance wasn't really about money. Maybe the money was bait. Maybe Charles wanted her back in the house for another reason. Emma looked at the notebook. Rule 4. On the first night of winter, listen for the piano. Winter was months away. She didn't understand. Then she remembered something. The piano wasn't in the West Wing. It was somewhere closer. She had heard it from the library. Emma opened a map of the house she had found in a drawer. The West Wing was connected to the main house by a long corridor. According to the floor plan, there was a music room. Emma stared at the location. The music room was directly behind the locked doors. She walked upstairs. This time, Margaret did not stop her. The West Wing doors were still closed. Emma placed her hand on the handle. It turned. Unlocked. She hesitated. Then pushed. The doors opened with a long groan. Cold air moved through the corridor. The West Wing looked abandoned. Dust covered the furniture. Paint had peeled from the walls. Portraits hung crookedly. Emma walked slowly. At the end of the hall was a large double door. Above it was a small brass plaque. Music room. Emma opened it. The room was enormous. A grand piano stood beneath a tall window. It was covered with a white cloth. Emma approached. The piano was old but beautiful. She lifted the cloth. The keys were yellowed. She touched one. A single note rang through the room. Emma pulled her hand back. On the piano sat a small photograph. Her mother. She was sitting at the piano. Emma looked closer. Her mother was pregnant. Beside her stood Charles. On the back of the photograph was another message. She played this song whenever she missed home. Emma stared at the piano. Without knowing why, she sat down. Her fingers hovered above the keys. Then something happened. Her hands moved. 3 notes. Then 5. Then a simple melody. Emma stopped. She knew the song. She had never learned piano, but her fingers knew exactly where to go. The melody continued. Soft, slow, sad, and suddenly the room disappeared. Emma was 4 again. Her mother sat at the piano. Charles stood near the window. Little Emma sat beneath the instrument. Her mother was crying. "Don't cry, Mommy." Anna wiped her face. "I'm not crying." "You are." Charles smiled sadly. "Your mother has something in her eye." Emma giggled. Then her mother began playing the same melody. The memory changed. A man's voice shouted from the hallway. "Anna." Her mother stopped playing. Charles stood. "Stay here." He walked toward the door. Another voice. "Michael, you lied to her." Emma's little heart began pounding. Anna ran toward the hallway. Charles grabbed her arm. Not in front of Emma. Michael shouted again. "You can't keep doing this." Then a loud crash. The memory shattered. Emma gasped and returned to the present. She was still sitting at the piano. Tears were running down her face. Someone had been standing in the doorway. "Margaret." She looked devastated. "You remembered." Emma nodded. "Michael." Margaret closed her eyes. "Yes." "What did he want?" "I don't know." "You're lying." Margaret looked at her. "Not about that." Emma stood. "What was my mother hiding?" Margaret took a step into the room. "Your mother wasn't hiding something from you." "Then who was she hiding it from?" Margaret looked toward the piano. "Everyone." Emma's heart sank. Before she could ask another question, something fell from beneath the piano. A small envelope slid across the floor. Emma picked it up. Her name was written on the front. For Emma. She opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. The handwriting belonged to Charles. "Emma, if you have found this, then you have remembered the song. That means the house is beginning to give you back what was taken. Do not trust every memory. Some memories were created to protect you. Some were created to deceive you. But one thing is certain. Your mother never abandoned you." Emma read the final line. "She left because someone wanted you dead." The paper slipped from her hand. Margaret covered her mouth. Emma looked at her. "Who wanted me dead?" Margaret began to cry. And from somewhere behind the walls of the music room came the faint sound of 3 piano notes. The same 3 notes Emma had heard on her first night. Only this time she understood something. They weren't random. They were a signal. Chapter 7. The Woman at the Garden Gate. Emma could not stop staring at the letter. Someone wanted her dead. The sentence seemed impossible. It belonged in an old detective novel, not in the quiet life she had known for 32 years. She picked up the paper again. "Who?" she asked. Margaret remained silent. "Who wanted me dead?" "I don't know." Emma looked at her. "You said that before." "Because it's true." "Then why did Charles write it?" "Because he believed it." "That's not enough." Margaret wiped her eyes. "No, it isn't." Emma folded the letter and placed it carefully inside her pocket. She had too many questions now. But one question was louder than all the others. Why had her mother left? The answer was apparently connected to a danger Emma had never known existed. She left the music room. Margaret followed. They walked through the west wing without speaking. When they reached the main staircase, Emma stopped. Did my mother ever come back? Margaret hesitated. Once. When? Years later. Why? To see you. Emma's heart tightened. She came here to see me. Yes. Why didn't she? Margaret looked away. She believed someone was watching the house. Emma's stomach dropped. Who? We never found out. Emma remembered the photograph from the library. Her mother standing beside Charles. The old letters. The missing uncle. The locked room. Everything seemed connected. But the center of the mystery remained hidden. That night, Emma called Lily again. They talked for nearly an hour. Lily listened carefully while Emma explained the latest discovery. When Emma finished, Lily was quiet. Okay, Lily said finally. I'm going to say something that you probably won't like. Go ahead. Leave. Emma frowned. What? Leave the house, at least temporarily. I can't. Why not? The inheritance. Emma, you have $10 million waiting for you. You can survive without it. Emma looked around the bedroom. She knew Lily was right. But something inside her resisted the idea. If I leave, I'll never find out what happened. Maybe that's exactly what whoever built this mystery wants. Emma was silent. Lily continued. Promise me you'll be careful. I will. Seriously. I promise. Good. After the call ended, Emma sat by the window. She watched the moon rise over the trees. Then she noticed something outside. A light. Near the garden gate. Emma stood. The light disappeared. She waited. Nothing. She opened the window. Cold air rushed into the room. Hello. No answer. Emma grabbed her coat and went downstairs. She wasn't sure why she was doing it. Perhaps curiosity. Perhaps fear. She walked across the lawn. The grass was wet beneath her shoes. The garden was dark except for the faint glow of the porch lights. When she reached the iron gate, she saw someone standing on the other side. A woman. She was perhaps in her 70s, wearing a long brown coat and holding an umbrella. Emma stopped. Can I help you? The woman stared at her. For several seconds, neither moved. Then the woman said quietly, You're Anna's daughter. Emma's heart jumped. Yes. The woman looked toward the house. She finally sent you back. My mother didn't send me. The woman's eyes filled with sadness. Then Charles did. Emma stepped closer. Who are you? The woman ignored the question. Did you find the blue stone? Emma froze. How do you know about that? The woman smiled faintly. Because I gave it to you. Emma felt a strange dizziness. You. Many years ago. Who are you? My name is Evelyn Parker. The name meant nothing. But the woman's face did. Emma had seen her before. In one of the photographs. She had been standing near the lake. Emma stared at her. You knew my mother. Yes. How? Evelyn looked toward the house. Your mother and I were friends. How close? Close enough that she trusted me with your life. Emma felt a chill. What does that mean? Evelyn stepped through the gate. Your mother knew she was in danger. From whom? I never learned the full name. Then what do you know? Evelyn looked at the house again. I know that someone was willing to pay a great deal of money to make sure you disappeared. Emma's voice became quiet. Why? Because you were the heir. To what? Evelyn shook her head. Not money. Emma felt confused. Then what? Evelyn looked directly at her. Power. Before Emma could respond, Evelyn reached into her coat. She removed a small envelope. I promised your mother I would give you this if you ever returned to the Whitmore house. Emma took it. Why didn't you give it to me earlier? I didn't know you had returned. How did you know tonight? Evelyn smiled. The house told me. Emma almost laughed. That isn't possible. You've already heard the piano. Emma went still. Evelyn nodded. Then you know. Know what? That Charles built a system of signals into this house. Emma stared at her. The piano. The piano, the lights, the bells. Certain doors. Emma thought about the 3 notes. What do the 3 notes mean? Evelyn's expression changed. They mean someone is coming. Emma looked behind her. The lawn was empty. Who? Evelyn didn't answer. Instead, she opened the envelope. Inside was a small newspaper clipping. The headline read, Local businessman's partner found dead. Emma read the article. The man's name was Jonathan Reed. She looked up. Reed. Evelyn nodded. Thomas Reed's father. Emma felt the pieces shift. How did he die? Officially, an accident. And unofficially, Evelyn lowered her voice. Your mother believed he was murdered. Emma stared at the clipping. Why? Because Jonathan had discovered something. What? Evelyn looked toward the house. Something about Charles. Emma's pulse quickened. What? But Evelyn stepped backward. You have to find the red room. The what? The red room. Where is it? Evelyn shook her head. Charles wanted you to find it yourself. Emma was becoming frustrated. Everyone keeps saying that. Evelyn smiled sadly. Because he knew you were stubborn. My mother said that too. Your mother loved that about you. Emma's eyes filled with tears. Evelyn reached out and touched her hand. Listen carefully. Do not trust Thomas Reed. Do not tell him about this conversation. And whatever happens, don't give him the photograph. Emma looked down. She was still holding the photograph Thomas had brought. Why? Because he is looking for something. What? I don't know. Then how do you know? Evelyn's face became serious. Because your mother disappeared trying to keep it from him. Emma's breath caught. My mother is dead. I know. She died in a car accident. That's what they told you. Emma felt as if the ground had shifted beneath her. What are you saying? Evelyn looked toward the dark road beyond the gate. I'm saying your mother didn't die in an accident. Emma couldn't speak. The woman stepped backward. You need to go inside. Wait. Why? Evelyn looked at the house. The lights. Emma turned. Every light in the Whitmore house had gone out. The entire building was dark. Then one by one, the windows began lighting up. First the library, then the upstairs hallway, then the music room. Finally, the small window beneath the stairs. Emma stared. What's happening? Evelyn whispered. The house is warning you. A piano note sounded from inside. Then another. Then 3. Emma remembered the signal. Someone is coming. She turned toward the driveway. At the far end, headlights appeared. A car was approaching. Evelyn grabbed her arm. Go inside. Who is it? I don't know. The car moved closer. Emma could see the outline of a dark sedan. Then it stopped. The driver's door opened. A man stepped out. Thomas Reed. Emma looked at Evelyn. But the woman was already walking away. "Wait." Evelyn continued toward the road. "Who is he looking for?" Evelyn turned once. "You." Then she disappeared into the darkness. Emma ran toward the house. The front door was unlocked. She entered. The lights were still flickering. Thomas's footsteps sounded on the porch. Emma hurried toward the library. Then she remembered the envelope Evelyn had given her. She opened it. Inside was a single photograph. Emma stared at it. It showed her mother standing beside a car. The date was written on the back. 3 days before the accident that supposedly killed her. But Anna was not alone. Standing beside her was Charles Whitmore. And in the reflection of the car window was another man. Emma recognized him immediately. Jonathan Reed, Thomas's father. On the back of the photograph beneath the date were 4 words. They both survived that night. Emma heard the front door open. Thomas called her name. "Emma." She quickly folded the photograph. The footsteps moved through the entrance hall. Slowly. Closer. Emma looked around the library. There was nowhere to hide. Then she noticed the bookshelf. The hidden latch. She pulled it. The shelf opened. Emma slipped inside just as the library door opened. Thomas entered. "Emma." She held her breath. He walked toward the desk. Then stopped. "Charles," he whispered. Emma listened from the darkness. Thomas wasn't looking for her anymore. He was looking for something else. Something Charles had hidden. Something he believed Emma had already found. Thomas pulled open a drawer. "Where is it?" Emma pressed one hand against her mouth. She didn't know what he was searching for. But suddenly, she understood the strange condition attached to her inheritance. The $10 million wasn't the secret. The house was. And Charles Whitmore had left it to her because he believed she was the only person who could uncover the truth. Chapter 8. A letter written 20 years ago. Emma remained hidden behind the bookshelf. She could hear Thomas moving through the library. A drawer opened. Another closed. Paper rustled. Then came the sound of the desk being pulled away from the wall. Emma held her breath. She had no idea what Thomas was looking for, but she knew one thing. He was not supposed to be there. After nearly a minute, Thomas cursed quietly. "Where did you put it, Charles?" Emma felt a strange mixture of fear and curiosity. Thomas knew Charles well enough to speak to him as if he were still alive. He also knew there was something hidden in the library. Something important enough to make him enter the house at night. Emma looked through the narrow opening in the bookshelf. Thomas stood beside the desk with a flashlight in one hand. He opened a small drawer that Emma hadn't noticed before. Inside were envelopes. Thomas searched through them. Then he stopped. His shoulders tightened. "No." He turned toward the door. For several seconds he stood completely still. Then he walked out. Emma waited. 5 seconds. 10. 20. She remained inside the hidden compartment until she could no longer hear his footsteps. Only then did she push the shelf open. She stepped into the library. Her heart was still racing. Thomas had searched the desk. Whatever he wanted was probably not there. Emma remembered the envelope Evelyn had given her. She pulled out the photograph again. They both survived that night. If the photograph was genuine, then her mother's supposed death had not happened the way Emma had been told. But if Anna had survived the accident, where had she gone? And why had no one told Emma? She placed the photograph on the desk. Something about it bothered her. The date, the car, the people. Emma looked closer at the photograph. In the background stood a roadside motel. She recognized the sign, Pine Hollow Motor Lodge. It was only 30 miles from Maplewood. Emma suddenly remembered something from her childhood. A blue sign, a room with floral curtains, her mother holding her hand, a man's voice telling her to stay quiet. Emma stepped backward. The memory was too strong. She closed her eyes. The scene became clearer. She was 5 years old. She was sitting on the edge of a motel bed. Her mother was packing a suitcase. Where are we going? Somewhere safe. Is Daddy coming? Her mother stopped. No. Why? Anna knelt beside her. Because sometimes grown-ups have to go away so their children can stay safe. Little Emma began crying. Anna hugged her. I love you more than anything. Then someone knocked on the motel door. 3 slow knocks. Anna froze. She looked toward the door. Mommy, don't make a sound. The memory vanished. Emma opened her eyes. She was back in the library. Her hands were shaking. The motel. She knew it now. Her mother had taken her there. Probably after the accident. Probably because someone was following them. Emma picked up the phone and called Lily. Hey, Lily answered sleepily. Lily, I need you to do something. What happened? Can you find out if Pine Hollow Motor Lodge still exists? There was a pause. Right now. Please. Okay. Emma waited. A few minutes later, Lily called back. It closed years ago. Emma felt disappointed. But I found an old address. The building was converted into apartments. Can you send it to me? Already did. Emma looked at the message. The address was familiar. She didn't know why. Then she noticed something else. The motel had been owned by a company called Whitmore Holdings. Emma stared at the screen. Everything led back to Charles. She thanked Lily and ended the call. Before leaving the library, Emma remembered Thomas. He had been searching for something. Perhaps the answer was somewhere in the desk. She examined it carefully. The drawers were empty except for old stationery. Then she noticed a scratch beneath the desktop. 3 small lines. Emma ran her fingers over them. The pattern felt familiar. 3 piano notes. 3 taps. 3 marks. She pressed the center of the scratched area. A tiny panel opened. Inside was a brass key. And beneath it was a letter. Emma unfolded it. The date at the top was 20 years old. October 17, 2006. The letter was addressed to Charles. Dear Charles, I have decided to leave. I know you will try to stop me, but please don't. You have done enough. Emma deserves a normal life. She deserves to grow up without knowing what happened between us. I know you believe keeping her here will protect her, but this house is no longer safe. Someone has been watching. Someone has been asking questions. I don't know who they work for, but I know they are getting closer. Please don't look for me. Please don't follow us. And most importantly, please don't tell Emma about Michael. She is too young. One day, when she is old enough, she may return. If she does, tell her the truth. Not all of it. Only enough for her to understand why I left. Anna. Emma lowered the letter. Michael. Again. Why had her mother specifically warned Charles not to tell Emma about her uncle? She turned the paper over. There was another line written on the back. This handwriting was Charles's. "Anna, I promised. But promises change when the person you are protecting comes back to the place you were trying to keep her away from." Emma sat down. She read the sentence again. Then she noticed something beneath it. A second line, written much later. "If Emma returns, she must know about the ledger." Emma's eyes narrowed. The ledger. That was what Thomas was searching for. She placed the letter inside her jacket and took the brass key. The key was small, old. It had a number engraved on it. 17. Emma looked toward the library shelves. She began searching. After several minutes, she found a row of old accounting books. One shelf contained volumes numbered by year. There was no 2006 ledger. Emma's heart beat faster. She searched again. Nothing. Then she remembered the hidden compartment. Maybe there was another. She pulled out the book labeled 2007. A click sounded. The shelf moved slightly. Emma smiled. Charles. Behind the books was a narrow metal cabinet. There was a lock. Emma inserted the brass key. It opened. Inside was a thick black ledger. She lifted it carefully. The cover had no title. Only one word was stamped in silver. Pine. Emma opened the first page. Names. Dates. Amounts of money. Property addresses. Some names were familiar. Town officials. Business owners. Lawyers. Police officers. People Emma had seen in Maplewood her entire life. Then she found a name that made her blood run cold. Jonathan Reed. Next to his name were several payments. The final entry was dated October 17, 2006. The same date as her mother's letter. Emma read the note beside it. Payment suspended. Subject refused further cooperation. She turned the page. Another name. Thomas Reed. But there were no payments. Only one handwritten sentence. Son knows more than father ever did. Emma closed the ledger. She suddenly understood why Charles had warned her. Thomas wasn't simply looking for an old family secret. He was looking for evidence. Evidence that could destroy someone. Maybe his father. Maybe himself. Emma carried the ledger toward the library door. Then she heard footsteps. Thomas. She quickly returned to the hidden compartment. The library door opened. Thomas entered. This time he wasn't alone. A second man's voice came from the hallway. Did you find it? No, Thomas answered. You said Charles left it here. He did. Then search again. Emma's blood ran cold. She knew that voice. She had heard it before. Not in the house. Not in her memories. On the phone. Daniel Morgan. Her attorney. Emma covered her mouth. Daniel entered the library. Thomas closed the door behind him. Emma has been here, Daniel said. Thomas nodded. She's found something. What? I don't know yet. Daniel sighed. Then we have a problem. Emma stared through the crack in the bookshelf. The attorney who had told her about the $10 million inheritance was standing in the room with Thomas Reed. And suddenly, the entire inheritance looked different. Maybe Charles hadn't chosen Emma because she was his favorite heir. Maybe he had chosen her because she was the only person who could legally unlock something everyone else desperately wanted. The ledger. Emma gripped it tightly. Then Daniel said something that made her blood run cold. She can't find out what happened to her mother. Thomas looked at him. She already suspects. Then we have to stop her. Emma's eyes widened. For the first time, she understood that the danger surrounding the Whitmore house wasn't something left in the past. It was still alive, and it had just walked through the front door. Chapter 9: The Secret Beneath the Floorboards. Emma stayed perfectly still. Daniel Morgan and Thomas Reed stood only a few feet away from the hidden compartment. She could hear every word. "We should leave," Daniel said. "Not yet. Thomas, I need the ledger." Emma tightened her grip around it. Thomas walked toward the desk. Charles didn't leave it in the obvious place. Daniel looked around the room. "Then where?" Thomas stopped. "Somewhere Emma would find it." Daniel frowned. "Why her?" "Because Charles wanted her to." A long silence followed. Then Daniel said, "You don't understand what you're dealing with." Thomas laughed bitterly. Neither did Charles. Emma felt a chill. The two men continued searching. She couldn't stay hidden forever. She needed a way out. Her eyes moved around the small compartment. There was a second door. It was narrow and nearly invisible behind a row of shelves. Emma touched the handle. Locked. She looked at the brass key. Number 17. She tried it. The lock turned. Emma opened the door slowly. A narrow passage stretched into darkness. She slipped inside and closed the door behind her. The passage smelled of dust and old stone. Emma used her phone flashlight. The walls were made of rough brick. She walked carefully. The passage descended slightly before turning left. Then she saw a wooden staircase. She followed it down. At the bottom was another door. This one had no handle, only a small metal plate. Emma touched it. A voice came from behind her. "Don't." Emma spun around. Margaret stood at the top of the stairs. Emma nearly screamed. "How did you get here?" "I know these passages." "You knew this existed?" "Yes." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because Charles told me not to." Emma shook her head. "Please stop saying that." Margaret came down the stairs. "Where is the ledger?" Emma held it up. Margaret closed her eyes. "You found it. Thomas and Daniel were looking for it." "I know." "How?" "I saw them arrive." Emma stared at her. "You knew Daniel was involved." "I suspected." "Suspected?" Margaret looked exhausted. "I never trusted him." "Then why did you let me meet him?" "Because Charles's will required it." Emma stared. "Required it?" Daniel was the attorney who prepared the will. Charles believed he could be trusted. "But he isn't." "No." Margaret looked at the metal plate. "That's why we need to keep moving." Emma followed her gaze. "What is this?" "The old security room." "Security?" "Charles built parts of the house to protect people." "From whom?" Margaret looked at her. "From the people he used to work with." Emma felt another piece of the puzzle fall into place. Charles wasn't just a businessman. "No." "What was he?" Margaret hesitated. "Someone who knew how powerful people hid their mistakes." The sentence stayed with Emma. "What does that mean?" "Open the door." Emma touched the metal plate. It slid sideways. A small compartment appeared. Inside was a keypad. Margaret entered 6 numbers. The door unlocked. They stepped inside. Emma stared. The room looked nothing like the rest of the house. Monitors covered one wall. Old security equipment lined another. There were shelves filled with tapes and documents. A map of Maplewood covered the center wall. Pins marked different buildings: the hospital, town hall, police station, several businesses, the Whitmore House, and Pine Hollow Motor Lodge. Emma walked toward the map. Why was Charles watching these places? Because he was afraid. Of who? Margaret didn't answer. Instead, she pointed toward a shelf. Look. Emma followed her. There were dozens of VHS tapes. Each had a date. Emma found one labeled October 17, 2006. She stared at it. The night my mother disappeared. Margaret nodded. Emma found an old television and VCR. She inserted the tape. The screen flickered. Static. Then a black and white security recording appeared. A parking lot. Pine Hollow Motor Lodge. The timestamp showed 11:43 p.m. Emma watched. A car entered the parking lot. She recognized it. Her mother's car. Anna stepped out. Emma was beside her. Then another car arrived. A dark sedan. A man stepped out. Jonathan Reed. Emma stopped breathing. He approached Anna. They argued. The video had no sound. Then Charles arrived. The three stood together. Something happened. Jonathan pointed toward Emma. Anna pulled her closer. Charles moved between them. Then the screen went black. Emma stared. That's it. Margaret shook her head. There are more tapes. They watched the next. 11:51 p.m. Jonathan was gone. Anna and Charles were talking. Charles handed Anna something. A small envelope. Then another car arrived. This one belonged to Michael. Emma leaned closer. Her uncle stepped out. He ran toward Anna. They argued. Charles shouted. Michael grabbed Anna's arm. Anna pulled away. Then the recording ended. The next tape was dated the following morning. The parking lot was empty, except for Anna's car. Emma felt tears gathering. What happened? Margaret shook her head. We don't know. But the camera recorded everything. Not everything. She pointed toward the bottom of the screen. A missing timestamp. Someone deleted part of the recording. Emma looked at the screen. Who? Charles believed it was someone inside the company. Emma turned toward her. What company? Margaret walked to the shelves. She removed a folder. Inside was an old corporate document. Emma read the name. Whitmore Security and Investigations. She looked up. Charles owned a security company. Yes. Why didn't I know? Because he sold it before you were born. Emma looked at the map again. Suddenly, the house made more sense. The cameras, the hidden passages, the signals, the locked rooms. Charles had spent his life watching people, and perhaps someone had been watching him. Emma returned to the tape. What's the next recording? Margaret hesitated. The next one is from the Whitmore House. Emma pressed play. The screen showed the house at 2:17 a.m. Rain fell heavily. The front gate opened. A vehicle entered. A man stepped out. Emma leaned closer. It was Michael. He walked toward the house. Then the screen flickered. He disappeared from view. A few minutes later, Anna appeared at a window. She was holding Emma. Then Charles ran outside. He looked terrified. Someone else entered the driveway. A second vehicle. Emma couldn't see the driver, but she could see the headlights. Charles looked toward the car. Then he grabbed Anna and pulled her away from the window. The screen went black. Emma stared. What happened after that? Margaret's voice was quiet. Your mother left the house that night. And Michael? We never saw him again. Emma looked at the floor. Was he killed? I don't know. Do you think he's alive? Margaret didn't answer. Emma turned back toward the security system. There was another tape. No label. She inserted it. The screen showed Charles sitting at a desk. He looked much older. The recording was clearly made near the end of his life. He looked directly into the camera. Emma. She froze. If you're watching this, then you're finally here. Charles smiled sadly. I wish I could have told you everything myself. He paused. I know you're angry. Emma whispered, yes. I know you're confused. She almost laughed. Yes. And I know you're wondering why I left you $10 million. Charles leaned closer to the camera. The money is not your inheritance. Emma stopped breathing. The house is. The screen flickered. Charles continued. This house contains records that could expose people who have spent decades believing themselves untouchable. Emma looked at Margaret. The older woman was crying silently. Charles continued. Your mother wanted the records destroyed. Emma frowned. Why? Because she believed the truth would put you in greater danger. Charles looked away for a moment. I disagreed. He sighed. I believed that someday you would need to know who you were. The screen flickered again. Then Charles said something that changed everything. Emma, your father was not Daniel Carter. Emma's entire body went cold. She looked at Margaret. Margaret closed her eyes. Charles continued. Daniel raised you. He loved you, but he was not your biological father. Emma couldn't move. She had spent her entire life believing Daniel Carter was her father. Charles's voice became quieter. Your biological father was Michael Carter. The screen went black. Emma stared at it. For several seconds, she couldn't understand what she had heard. Michael. Her uncle. Her mother. Charles. The missing pieces suddenly rearranged themselves into something terrifying. Michael wasn't her uncle. He was her father. Margaret stepped toward her. Emma. Emma backed away. No. I'm sorry. No. Your mother wanted to tell you. Then why didn't she? Because she was afraid. Of who? Margaret's eyes filled with tears. Everyone. Emma looked toward the door. She needed to leave. But before she could move, a loud sound echoed through the house. The front door slammed. Then footsteps. Someone had entered. Margaret looked at the security monitor. Her face went pale. Thomas. Emma shook her head. No. Margaret pointed to another screen. The image showed a man walking through the entrance hall. It wasn't Thomas. It wasn't Daniel. Emma stared at the screen. The man looked older. His hair was gray. He moved slowly. But there was something about his face that Emma recognized. The shape of his eyes. The way he carried himself. Emma stepped closer to the monitor. Who is that? Margaret whispered. Michael. Emma's heart stopped. The man on the screen looked directly into the camera. Then he smiled. Chapter 10. The Stranger Who Knew Her Mother. Emma stared at the security monitor. The man stood in the entrance hall, beneath the old grandfather clock. He was older now, perhaps in his late 60s, with silver hair and a weathered face. But there was something unmistakable about him. The eyes. Emma had seen those eyes before. Not in a photograph. In her own reflection. She looked at Margaret. "That's him." Margaret nodded. "Michael." Emma's mouth went dry. Her biological father was alive. After all these years, the man everyone had told her had disappeared had been standing inside the house. The house she had entered only days ago. The house that had somehow been waiting for her. "Why didn't you tell me?" Emma whispered. Margaret looked at the monitor. "I didn't know he would come." "He's my father." "Yes." "Then I'm going to talk to him." Margaret grabbed her arm. "Wait." Emma pulled free. "No, I've spent my entire life believing a lie. I'm done waiting." She ran up the stairs. The security room had another exit leading directly into the hallway. Emma opened the door. The house was silent. She walked toward the entrance. Michael was no longer beneath the clock. "Michael." No answer. She moved farther into the hall. "Michael." A voice came from the library. "Emma." She froze. The voice was older than she expected, but gentle. She walked toward it. Michael stood beside the library window. He was holding the old photograph of himself with Emma. For several seconds, father and daughter simply looked at one another. Michael's eyes filled with tears. "You look like her." Emma could barely speak. "My mother." He nodded. "More every year." "You're alive." "I am." "Why?" Michael smiled sadly. "That's a long story. I've waited 32 years. He looked down. "I know." "No, you don't." Emma's voice broke. "You don't know what it was like growing up without answers." Michael closed his eyes. "I know more than you think." "Then tell me." He walked toward the fireplace. "I was told you were safe." "By who?" "Charles." Emma frowned. "Charles told you I was safe?" "Yes." "Then why didn't you come back?" Michael's face changed. "Because I believed coming back would put you in danger." Emma felt anger rising. "Everyone says that." "Because it's true." "Who was trying to hurt me?" Michael looked toward the library door. "Your mother." Emma stared. "My mother." "No." He shook his head. "Not your mother, the people who were hunting your mother." Emma waited. Michael continued. "Your mother discovered something about Charles's company." "The security company." "Yes." "What?" "Charles had evidence against several powerful people, politicians, business owners, police officers, people who had spent years using money and influence to hide crimes." Emma remembered the ledger. "So the ledger was dangerous." "What's in it?" "Everything." Michael looked at her. "Names, payments, bribes, blackmail, witnesses." Emma swallowed. "Then why didn't Charles go to the police?" "Because some of the police were involved." She thought of the map. Town hall, police station, hospital, businesses, all marked. Who was Jonathan Reed? Michael's expression hardened. "He worked for Charles." "And you?" "I did too." Emma stared. "You were involved?" "At first." "What did you do?" "I investigated people. Like a private investigator." "More complicated." Michael looked toward the window. "I believed Charles was trying to expose corruption. I believed we were doing something good. And then I discovered Charles had been keeping something from me." "What?" Michael looked directly at Emma. "Your mother." Emma's heart tightened. "What about her?" Charles loved her. Emma shook her head. He was much older than her. It wasn't romantic. Michael sighed. Charles saw Anna as family. His sister Eleanor had taken Anna under her protection when she was young. Emma remembered the photograph. Eleanor. Her mother. Charles. Michael. It was all beginning to make sense. But what did Charles hide? Michael hesitated. He knew Anna was pregnant. Emma's breath caught. With me? Yes. And he knew I was your daughter. He knew. Then why did everyone tell me Daniel was my father? Michael looked ashamed. Because Daniel agreed to raise you. Why? Because I was being hunted. Emma sat down. Michael continued. After I discovered the truth about Charles's records, I wanted to expose everything. Anna wanted to run. Charles wanted us to stay hidden. Who was right? Neither of us. Emma looked at him. What happened the night we left? Michael's eyes became distant. I went to the house because I found out someone had located you. Who? I don't know. You don't know. I never saw his face. Then what happened? Your mother took you to Pine Hollow. Emma remembered the dream. The motel room. Her mother's suitcase. The knocking. Michael continued. I followed you there. Emma stared. That's what the recording showed. Yes. Then why did you disappear? Michael's jaw tightened. Because I was captured. Emma felt cold. By who? Jonathan Reed. She remembered the ledger. The same man. Yes. What did he want? Names. Whose names? Everyone in the ledger. Michael looked down. He wanted the evidence destroyed. Did he hurt you? Michael didn't answer. Emma understood. How did you escape? Charles found me. When? Years later. Emma's eyes widened. Years. I was held for months. By the time Charles found me, Anna had already disappeared. Emma whispered she died. Michael shook his head. No. Emma looked at him. She survived. Michael nodded. Your mother survived the crash. Emma's eyes filled with tears. Where is she? Michael looked away. I don't know. Emma stood. You don't know. I haven't seen her since. But you said she survived. She did. Then where did she go? Michael reached into his coat. He removed a small envelope. I received this 2 years ago. Emma took it. There was no address. Only her name. Emma. She opened it. Inside was a photograph. A woman stood beside a lake. Older. Her hair was gray. But Emma knew her. Her mother. Alive. Emma's knees nearly gave way. No. Michael caught her arm. Emma. She's alive. I believe so. Where? I don't know. When was this taken? 2 years ago. Emma stared at the photograph. On the back was a handwritten sentence. When Emma is ready, bring her home. Emma looked at Michael. What does home mean? Michael's eyes filled with tears. The place where the story began. The Whitmore House. He nodded. Emma looked around the library. Then she remembered Charles's words. The house is your inheritance. Not the money. The house. She understood now. Charles hadn't wanted her to spend a year here simply to satisfy a strange condition. He wanted her to uncover the truth. He wanted her to find her mother. And perhaps he had known that Michael would eventually return. Emma wiped her eyes. "Why did you come tonight?" Michael looked toward the ceiling. "Because Thomas found out I'm alive." Emma's blood ran cold. "What?" "He has been searching for me." "Why?" "Because he believes I still have the original ledger." Emma froze. She looked at the black book hidden beneath her coat. Michael noticed. "You found it." Emma nodded. Thomas and Daniel were searching for it. Michael's expression changed. "They know." "How?" "Because someone told them." Emma thought about the lawyer. Daniel Morgan. The man who had contacted her. The man who had known exactly how to find her. Daniel. Michael nodded. He was working for Jonathan Reed. But Jonathan is dead. That doesn't mean his operation died with him. Emma suddenly remembered something. Thomas had said Charles was afraid. Daniel had said Emma couldn't find out what happened to her mother. They weren't simply hiding a family secret. They were protecting a network. A network that might still exist. Michael stepped closer. "Emma, listen to me." She looked at him. "The money is dangerous." "The money?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because $10 million is not what you inherited." He looked toward the library shelves. "The $10 million is only the price attached to the house." Emma frowned. "Price?" Michael nodded. Charles knew people would come for the house once he died. "Why?" "Because something is hidden here." "What?" Michael lowered his voice. "The original evidence." Emma felt a chill. "The ledger isn't the only thing." "No." "What else?" Michael looked at the old grandfather clock. "Proof." "Proof of what?" Before he could answer, the front door slammed. Michael's face changed. "Someone is here." Emma heard footsteps. Then Thomas's voice echoed through the entrance hall. "Emma." Michael grabbed her hand. "There's no time." "Where are we going?" "Down." He pulled her toward the hidden passage. Margaret appeared from the hallway. "He's here." Michael nodded. "Thomas knows." Margaret looked at Emma. "Take her to the old room." Michael nodded. Emma looked between them. "What old room?" Neither answered. Then the sound of footsteps grew louder. Michael opened the hidden passage. Before Emma entered, he looked at her. "I've spent 32 years trying to keep you safe." His voice trembled. "I won't lose you now." They disappeared into the darkness. Behind them, the library doors opened. Thomas Reed stepped inside. He looked around. Then he smiled. "I know you're here." Emma held her breath. Thomas walked slowly toward the bookshelf. He placed one hand against it. "Your father made the mistake of coming back." Michael tightened his grip on Emma's hand. Thomas smiled. "And now you're going to lead me straight to him." The house that finally let her go. 1 year had passed since Emma Carter first drove through the iron gate of the Whitmore House. The seasons had changed quietly. Spring had brought rain and green leaves. Summer had filled the gardens with flowers. Autumn had painted the maple trees gold and red. Winter had covered the roof in snow. And through all of it, Emma had remained. Not because she needed the $10 million. By the time the year was nearly over, she had stopped thinking about the money altogether. She stayed because the house had become something else. It had become the place where she had finally learned the truth. The truth about her mother. The truth about Michael. The truth about Charles. And perhaps most importantly, the truth about herself. The original evidence Charles had hidden beneath the house had eventually been turned over to federal investigators. The ledger, recordings, financial documents, and years of carefully preserved records exposed a network of corruption that had stretched across several businesses and local institutions. Thomas Reed had cooperated after realizing his father had used him for years. Daniel Morgan had disappeared before investigators could question him, but the evidence against him was substantial. Jonathan Reed, who everyone had believed had died in an accident, had been responsible for much more than Emma had ever imagined. But there was one mystery that remained. Anna Carter, Emma's mother. For months Emma had searched. She contacted hospitals. She searched old records. She spoke with people who had known Anna. She followed every lead. Nothing. Until the first morning of spring. Emma was sitting on the front porch with a cup of coffee when a letter arrived. It had no return address. Her hands trembled before she even opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Emma, I think it is time. If you want to see me, come to the old lake house. Come alone. I will be waiting. There was no signature. Emma didn't need one. She knew. The lake house was 3 hours away. She drove there that afternoon. The road wound through forests and small towns before ending beside a quiet lake. The house was modest. Nothing like the Whitmore mansion. A woman stood on the porch. She was older. Her hair was almost completely gray. She leaned slightly against the railing. Emma stopped walking. For several seconds, neither of them moved. Then the woman whispered, Emma. Emma's eyes filled with tears. Mom. Anna covered her mouth. Emma walked forward. Neither spoke when they embraced. There were too many lost years between them. Too many questions. Too many nights when Emma had wondered whether her mother had ever loved her. But in that moment she knew. Some wounds didn't disappear. They simply became easier to carry. They spent the afternoon talking. Anna told her everything she could. She told her about Michael, about Charles, about the night she had fled, about the people who had threatened her. She explained why she had stayed away. I thought if I came back they would find you. Emma wiped her eyes. You could have told me. I know. You should have trusted me. I know. Emma looked at her mother. Why didn't you? Anna smiled sadly. Because you were 5 years old. Emma laughed through her tears. I would have been terrible at keeping secrets. You were. They both laughed. For the first time in decades, Anna looked peaceful. Before Emma left, her mother handed her a small wooden box. Inside was a blue stone. Emma stared at it. Where did you get this? Anna smiled. Charles gave it to you. I thought Evelyn gave it to me. She did. Emma looked confused. Anna laughed softly. Charles gave it to Evelyn. Evelyn gave it to you. Emma held the stone in her palm. Blue is for courage. Anna nodded. You always needed more courage than a child should have. Emma closed her fingers around it. I think I had enough. No, Anna said, you had just enough. Emma returned to Maplewood 2 days later. Michael was waiting at the house. He had changed during the year. He looked older but happier. He was finally able to walk through the front door without fear. Margaret stood beside him. When Emma entered, they smiled. Did you find her? Michael asked. Emma nodded. She's coming home soon. Michael closed his eyes. For a moment, he simply breathed. Then he smiled. The three of them stood together in the entrance hall. The grandfather clock ticked softly. Emma looked around. The portraits, the staircase, the old wooden floor, the library, the music room. The house no longer frightened her. It felt peaceful. That evening, Emma walked alone through the West Wing. She entered the music room. The grand piano stood beneath the window. For months it had remained silent. Emma sat down. She placed her fingers on the keys. Then she played the melody her mother had taught her when she was a little girl. The same melody that had once frightened her. Now it felt beautiful. When she finished, the room was silent. Emma smiled. "Thank you, Charles." She stood and walked toward the door. Before leaving, she noticed something on the piano. A small envelope. She picked it up. Her name was written on the front. She opened it. "Emma, if you are reading this after one full year, then you have done what I hoped you would do. You stayed. You remembered. And you found the truth. I know you may wonder why I left you $10 million. The answer is simple. Money was the only thing I could give you that would guarantee your freedom. But I never wanted you to become wealthy. I wanted you to become free. Free from the secrets. Free from the fear. Free from the stories other people told you about who you were. You were never meant to inherit my life. You were meant to build your own. The house belongs to you now. But you don't have to keep it. If you choose to sell it, sell it. If you choose to live here, live here. If you choose to turn it into something that helps other people, then do that. Just don't let this house become another prison. And remember one final thing. The greatest inheritance is not what someone leaves behind. It is what you choose to do with it. Charles." Emma folded the letter. She stood quietly for a long time. Then she walked downstairs. Margaret was sitting in the kitchen. Michael was reading a newspaper. Emma placed the letter on the table. "I think I know what I'm going to do." Michael looked up. "What?" "I'm keeping the house." Margaret smiled. "Why?" "Because it remembers too much." She looked toward the hallway. "And because it deserves a happier story." Over the following months, Emma turned the Whitmore House into something Charles had never imagined. The library became a free community reading room. The gardens became a public space. The old music room hosted children's lessons every Saturday. Several rooms were converted into temporary housing for families who needed somewhere safe to stay. Emma donated a large portion of the inheritance to local schools, hospitals, and organizations that helped people escaping difficult situations. She kept enough money to live comfortably. But she never stopped working. She still loved books. She still drank too much coffee. She still drove her old Honda, even though Lily repeatedly told her that driving a 12-year-old car after inheriting $10 million was ridiculous. And every Sunday evening, Emma sat on the porch with her mother, Michael, Margaret, and Lily. They ate dinner. They talked. They laughed. Sometimes they argued. Ordinary things. Beautiful things. The things Emma had once believed she would never have. One evening, nearly 2 years after she first arrived, Emma walked to the iron gate. The sun was setting behind the trees. She looked back at the house. For years, it had been a place of secrets. Now children were laughing inside. Music floated through an open window. Someone was reading aloud in the library. Emma smiled. Then she noticed something. The old gate, which had always been difficult to open, moved easily. She pushed it wider. The road beyond was quiet. Open. Waiting. Emma stood there for a moment. She realized that the house had never really been trying to keep her inside. It had been trying to help her understand why she had spent so much of her life feeling as though something was missing. She had thought she inherited $10 million. She hadn't. She had inherited a story, a family, a home, a second chance, and the courage to choose what came next. Emma closed the gate gently. Then she walked back toward the house. Behind her, the last light of evening disappeared over the hills. Inside, the piano began to play. 3 soft notes. Emma stopped. She smiled. She knew what they meant now. Not danger. Not a warning. Goodbye. She walked inside. And for the first time since she was a little girl, the Whitmore house felt completely silent. Not empty. Not lonely. Just peaceful. As if, after all those years, it had finally been allowed to rest. And Emma finally understood the strange condition Charles Whitmore had placed on the $10 million inheritance. He had never really asked her to live in the house for 1 year. He had asked her to come home, to stay long enough to remember, to stay long enough to forgive, to stay long enough to discover that some inheritances are measured in dollars, while the ones that matter most are measured in people, memories, and second chances. And sometimes, the greatest fortune a person can inherit is simply the chance to begin again. Emma never forgot the year she spent in the Whitmore house. She remembered the locked doors, the hidden passages, the old photographs, and the piano that seemed to know her better than she knew herself. But most of all, she remembered the people she found there. Her mother, her father, Margaret, and the truth. The $10 million had changed her life, but not in the way she had expected. She didn't become someone different. She simply became free to be herself. A year after Charles Whitmore's death, Emma stood on the front porch one quiet evening and watched the sunset disappear behind the Vermont hills. Her mother sat beside her. Michael was inside making coffee. Margaret was laughing with Lily in the kitchen. For the first time, the enormous house didn't feel mysterious. It felt like home. Emma reached into her pocket and touched the small blue stone her mother had given her. She smiled. "Blue is for courage," she whispered. Then she looked toward the piano room. No music came this time. And that was okay. The house had nothing left to warn her about. Nothing left to hide. Nothing left to prove. Emma finally understood what Charles had wanted her to discover. The greatest part of the inheritance had never been the $10 million. It was the truth. It was forgiveness. It was finding the family she thought she had lost forever. And it was realizing that no matter how complicated the past became, the future was still hers to choose. She stood and walked inside. The front door closed softly behind her. Outside, the last light faded from the sky. Inside, Emma's family gathered around the dinner table. There were no secrets anymore. Just stories. Just laughter. Just home. And somewhere in the old Whitmore house, the piano remained silent. For once, silence didn't mean something was wrong. It meant the story was over. And Emma was finally ready to begin her own. The end.